All right, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to get you started on your separating mixtures assignment for today. Um, this assignment is not particularly hard, and you're going to be doing some things that you've done multiple times before, and this is just good practice on our properties. So, how would you separate the mixtures? So, we have several mixtures below that we are going to talk about how we would separate. Now, we are actually going to separate these next week if everything goes according to plan. So, the plan that you're going to make on the assignment today is the plan that you will use to actually separate them next week. All right. So, you're going to record information on this page on what tools you might use and what property of matter that you are going to use to separate the mixture. Okay. So the first section should be very familiar because we've done this multiple times, and the reason why we're doing this is just to help us remember what all these terms mean. So for salt, what's it made of? Salt. Physical state, remember physical state is solid, liquid, or gas. The salt is a solid. Is it more dense or less dense than water? That's a tricky question because it is soluble. But if you put salt in, it will sink to the bottom. So it is more dense than water. It's not magnetic. And yes, it is soluble in water. Okay. For pepper, it's just pepper. It's a solid. This one's kind of tricky too because it's a little of both. Pepper is a mixture, so if you remember, it in itself, it's its own mixture. If you remember when we put the pepper in the water, some of it floated on the top and some of it sank to the bottom. So it's actually both. Or actually, I'm going to put combination because it's got some stuff in it that's more dense and some stuff in it that's less dense. It is not magnetic and it does not dissolve in water. So now that we've written down our properties for the two items in our mixture, in our salt and pepper mixture, now we need to figure out how we're going to separate these. Okay, and the way we want to do that is we want to actually look at these properties and see what's different. Okay, since they're both not magnetic, a magnet's not going to work. Since one of them is more dense and the other one's more dense and less dense, some pieces of it are more, some pieces are less. That doesn't make for a good way to separate. Um, they're both solids, but they're both very very small. So we're not going to be able to just use our hands. And then the material that they're made of doesn't really help us either. But I want to focus in on this soluble in water. Okay, because salt is soluble in water and pepper is not, we can use water to separate them. Okay, so we can use water, and we can also use a filter to separate them. Okay, and the property of matter we're going to use is solubility in water. So how would we do it? Okay, well the first thing we would do, step one, and actually I'm going to make a little step-by-step list here. Step one is we would dissolve the salt into the water. And remember, the salt and pepper are mixed together, so we're just going to basically pour. And here, let me say this a little differently. We're going to pour the mixture into water, okay, and stir. Now the salt will dissolve, okay, so that's step one. So now we've got the mixture's in water, the salt has dissolved, the pepper's still floating around. Okay, so then what are we going to do? Well, now we got to separate, excuse me, the pepper and the salt water. So we're going to pour the mixture through a filter. And this will separate the pepper from the salt water. Okay? And then the last thing we're going to do is we will boil the salt water, and this will separate the water from the salt. And so that would be number one, salt and pepper mixture, that's how we would separate it. Or a way. If you come up with a more creative way, that's awesome too. But this is a way that will absolutely work. All right. Let's go ahead and do one more together. Let's do sand and iron filings. And I'm actually going to delete a little bit so this will scoot up because I don't want this to go on the next page. All right, so sand, what's it made of? It's made of sand. Physical state is solid. It is more dense than water. It is not magnetic. It does not dissolve in water. Iron filings made of iron. It is also solid. Remember, iron filings, they're like iron dust. It is more dense than water. It is magnetic because it's made of iron, but it is not soluble. So again, when we're looking through on how we want to separate, we want to pay attention to what's different, okay? The material, that's not really going to make that big a difference. Physical state, they're both solid and they're both very small, so we can't really use our hands. They're both more dense than water, so they'll both sink in water, so that's not helpful. But the iron is magnetic and the sand is not, so that could be helpful. And neither one are soluble in water, so that's not helpful. So let's focus in on the magnetism, okay? So if we used a magnet, we use magnetism, then what we could do is very simply just run a magnet. I could spell magnet. Run a magnet through the mixture. The magnet will pick up the iron filings and leave the sand. And that's it. That's how we would separate sand and iron filings. Now, if I'm able to find some iron filings, we'll do this a little bit different because it actually kind of makes a mess when you run the magnet directly on the iron filings, but there's a little trick that actually makes it a lot easier. So, but that's really it. Just use a magnet, run the magnet through the mixture of sand and iron filings, and it'll separate the mixture. All right, guys, I'm going to leave you to do the rest of them. Make sure you follow the examples. I've given you the first two, so make sure you follow the examples I've given as you finish the rest of these. And remember to focus on what is different about them. What is different? What property is different? All right, good luck, and if you have questions, feel free to email me.